What's going on, HSE101? It's Dr. Argus. Hopefully everyone is having an exciting early summer, getting ready for the 4th in the next few days. So I wanted to take a moment to just run over some of the topics for this week. So one of the big things that comes up is IDTs, interdisciplinary teams. So the reason that they exist, these teams, we have all these different groups of folks working on the same issue. The reason they come up is because there's different needs. You may have a family, an example of a family where it's a homeless mom and 3 kids. We can't just respond to mom's needs or just respond to the middle kid's need. We've got to figure out what we can do to wrap some services around everybody. So in order to do this, we have to ensure that we have a nice grasp on the different things that we're going to need in this case. We also have to figure out where we start. So if you are let's say you're an education advocate, you are working for a school district, and someone puts on your desk this paper that says, John, Rochelle, and Mia's mom, John, Rochelle, and Mia are the kids, their mom has just lost housing. So now you're trying to put some solutions together for these kids because, of course, you don't want them to end up truant from school and missing out on information. You don't want that to happen. So you want to try to get ahead of that. But at the same time, you also want to ensure that you're helping mom figure out what her next steps are. Well, you know that because you're working for the school, there's only so much you can do. And let's just imagine that one of those kids doesn't go to your school yet. Well, technically, you can't really do a lot for them. So we've got to figure out what your limits are there, how you can navigate around those by using other team members, by building relationships with other agencies, by seeing who else the family is working with, and developing a plan so that everyone knows what everybody else is supposed to be doing and what they're supposed to be doing. So those are some of the ideas to see a case holistically. So when it comes in the door, it comes into your office, it's put on your desk. Your starting place is, what do the folks need? The folks involved in this file, what do they need? What's my first step? What am I able to do here? Again, if you're working for an education agency, maybe you're not able to do things with food assistance or housing. Maybe you just can't do that. So then you have to ask yourself, well, because these other needs exist, who can help me? So these interdisciplinary teams, again, they're teams where different professional backgrounds, people with different professional backgrounds, come together to work on the same case, issue, or problem. So I know we're talking human services here, but I'm just going to slide over and give you a medical example. So think of surgery, right? So before the surgery, there's a surgeon. That person must consult with the anesthesiologist and the nursing team. Got to figure out the doses and make sure you can put the person to sleep and wake them back up, and all that can happen, and that you got somebody there to hand you the tools you need and to hold a clamp and do all the things you need to have happen. The nurses have to get the patient ready. You probably got to get shaved if you're having a modern surgery. So you probably got to get shaved. You probably got to make sure that everything is medically okay with you, that your blood pressure is at a stable point, that you are not having an issue with your heart, your lungs, your liver. They got to make sure you're okay before you go into surgery. And then right before you go into surgery, the anesthesiologist is to pop up and give that proper dose. Well, during the surgery, the surgeon still has a job. He's got to do the surgery, or she's got to do the surgery. The nurses have to check those vital signs to make sure everything is like it's supposed to be. And the anesthesiologist has to monitor those signs, but if something starts to go bad with the anesthesia, they're the only person in the room who has the training to act on it, to interpret what it means that something is going bad, identify exactly what steps they need to take, and to go ahead and do that. So after the surgery, it's a couple of days later, it's a week later, well, the surgeon doesn't really have a whole lot to do. Maybe they'll have their office give you a call. Maybe they'll schedule a follow-up visit just to make sure everything is healing up fine. But the anesthesiologist, once they wake you up, there's nothing to do. But who has the work for the next 6 months to help get you together? The physical therapist. Well, the physical therapist wasn't involved in before surgery, and the physical therapist wasn't even really involved in the surgery. And come to think of it, after the surgery, where are the nurses? We don't need them for anything. Where are the nurses at? The reality is that on these interdisciplinary teams, even though we all may work for the same place, in this case a hospital, but it could be a human services agency easily, that even though we may work for the same place, we still have an obligation to focus on our particular discipline, our particular strengths. So again, a doctor is a doctor. Typically, anesthesiologists are also doctors. But if that anesthesiologist focused on delivering anesthesia and figuring out what to use and how to work around people's allergies and all that jazz, if they do that, they're not able to focus on how to do surgeries, how to fix a knee, how to put a broken arm back together. That's not what they do. But they're both needed in order to make it happen, because you can't just have this great surgeon, but there's no one to take the pain away or to knock somebody out. Well, you're probably not going to be able to have knee surgery when you're wide awake, right? Wide awake and feeling everything. So with that in mind, we need these different team members, but we also need some of those supportive team members. So if the degrees and the training put those docs kind of at the top of the list there, well, the degrees in training for human services professionals kind of puts them at the at the top of the heap. And since they're at the top of the heap, that the nurses or some of the supportive staff that are available, PT, occupational therapy, some of those folks end up kind of being like our paraprofessionals for human services, volunteers, people who have great passion to do the work. Let's say we're talking mentoring or we're talking something else. Great passion to do the work. But again, they haven't had the training. They haven't had some of that professional experience or educational exposure. So that is where the surgeon has to tell the nurse where they need the nurse to clamp or blot, or what they need the nurse to do. The nurse is very capable, able to take care of all sorts of stuff, but it's the qualified human services professional who, just like that surgeon, is kind of leading that conversation a little bit. So, a couple things to notice here as I wind it down. Interdisciplinary team members, they may work at the same place or they may work at different places. So in the case that I mentioned earlier, where you're imagining that you are in a parallel place of this surgeon and nursing team, physical therapist, and anesthesiologist, now you can imagine that you are this school counselor. And now you're trying to help the family sort through homelessness. But because the school can't let people live in the school, there's rules and parameters around that. So you may need to touch base with some team members who don't work with you in the same building, but want to work with you on the same problem. So some team members can do the same thing all the time, or others can do different things at different points in the treatment process. So you literally can have some folks who are just kind of out there in left field. They're always there. They're ready for whatever comes out of left field. These may be those intake workers that whatever you need, I'm always here. I'm always going to get a copy of the birth certificate and social and driver's license, and I'm always going to have a phone number for you, and I'm always going to have the numbers filled out for contacts and email. And that may be that sort of person where, hey, they're still a member of the team. They're a very important member of the team because they're how you can connect everybody else on the team and how you can share information with other people on the team. So you have that. You're getting that from this particular team member where they're kind of in a fixed position. They're always doing the same thing. But others, they kind of flex a little bit and they do different things in the process. So at one point, the nurses had to prep the patient. So their job looked like shaving and sanitizing and getting everybody intubated with the tubes and so on and so forth. That was their job at one point. And then at another point, their job shifted, and their job was to watch what was going on and to kind of continually check a couple of different places on those vital signs to ensure everything was all right. Again, sometimes the role is the same, sometimes it shifts a little bit, sometimes it just depends on the situation. Now, the final thing to take away from this is that although somebody may be the lead, in this case, the surgeon is the boss, they're the lead, that doesn't mean that the other work that's being done isn't important, because again, the surgeon couldn't do their work on an unprepped patient. They get an infection, potentially be further injured, sue, die, all sorts of problems. Or somebody who has a surgeon on their team but doesn't have physical therapy may end up in worse shape than they first came in at because they weren't able to get back up to speed. They could begin developing pneumonia. They could, just depending on what the issue is. There can be all sorts of problems going on. So now you're thinking about it. Now you're open. So your clearest human services example, I've left it blank because I want you to fill in an example. What's an example of an interdisciplinary team? Like, think about it. Who's somebody, or what's a situation where you could imagine having to work with different team members? It may be you got to talk to your supervisor on something, and your coworker on something, and so be it. But the goal is that you are looking beyond just the people who have the same certifications you do and the same experience you do, and you're kind of reaching out a little bit. So you're saying, hey, there may be a healthcare need. Let me get them connected with somebody who can help them get insurance. They may have a food security need. Who do I know, or what agency do I know that can help out with that? They need a clothing voucher for the kids. I don't have any resources for that. Who can help them there? Right? So we're exploring from a lot of different angles who we may partner with. So give an example, and then feel free to share a little bit about what those different team members might have to do and what they may look like. So with that being said, I'll catch you further in the discussion board.